Hello everyone. Yes, we're going to talk about Checkmk. First of all, I'd like to give you a short introduction about myself. I'm an active member of the monitoring community in Germany since, well, almost 20 years now. I've been starting with using Nagios 3 on my own, then went into the role of the Nagios maintainer, developing this tool, basically for visualizing monitoring information you gather with Nagios or Isinger. Went into cooperation with Matthias, joined his company as a developer for working on Checkmk, and by now I'm in the role of the head of development, leading the development of Checkmk and the surrounding projects. So we're going to talk about Checkmk, and first of all, to get an understanding about who I'm talking to, I'd like to ask who of you is using Checkmk? Okay, so quite a few, not that many. I didn't expect anything else. Who of you have tried Checkmk and used something else? Okay, and who has never heard of Checkmk? At least some. Okay, so only a short introduction. Checkmk in all its editions is a full-fledged monitoring system. So you have a good feature set for your needs that you can set up a basic infrastructure monitoring, whatever infrastructure you have, physical, virtualized, containerized, cloud, on-premise, whatever. We have the capabilities to be deployed in all these environments and monitor these environments. When you go with Raw edition, that's our open source edition, then you can have a full monitoring system with graphing included, and a lot of plugins being integrated in Checkmk, shipped with Checkmk, so that you don't have to make a choice on your own how to monitor SNMP network interface or something. It is built inside Checkmk. It does it the right way. It is capable of doing all the things you need, IPv6, SNMP v3. You don't need to have this in every plugin, supported by every of these plugins. It's directly in the core and well integrated. Checkmk has an auto-discovery feature, which is the second of the biggest strengths of Checkmk. You configure the basic settings of a host, configure the address, configure the credentials, then you tell Checkmk to contact the device to discover the services you can monitor there. Discover all the network interfaces, discover all the Windows services you're interested in. Later on, you can filter if you're not interested in something. But in the first place, basic monitoring is set up automatically for you, so that you don't have to do the basic work, the fundamental work, to get something up and running. And that is working with all the editions. In this talk, we focus on the Raw edition, which you can download directly and use. When you're not an enterprise customer, you may also be interested in the cloud edition and the free option there. Because in smaller environments, you can have an unlimited time use. You can, if you monitor up to 750 services, you can use the cloud edition for free for basically a lifetime. So if you want to try out the cloud edition features, that's the edition which has the most features of Checkmk. Up to that size, you can use it as long as you wish. Similar to the Raw edition. The only difference is that it's not open source, but still free to use. In lab environments, at home, whatever, feel free to try. So you can also test all the enterprise and cloud features. So in the talk now, we are focusing on what has happened in Checkmk over the past years. So I wanted to also give you a quick recap what has happened since our last talk at the OSMC, which was in 2019, to give you an understanding what has happened in between, because some of you may only have seen it back then. Then we look at the latest news of the latest release we made in May. Then we talk a bit about what is happening in the Checkmk ecosystem, in the community, what projects evolve over time. We look a bit into the company, how it is grown, and then also I give a look at what is on the roadmap for the next versions. So in Checkmk 2.0, a few years ago, we reinvented the user interface of Checkmk. If you look at this, it looks more modern, but from the navigation concepts, it's quite similar to the old Nagios style user interface. And we reworked that. If you look closely, on the right here is the old sidebar, which is mixing status overview and navigation elements, which is for some people a bit surprising, which is also taking a lot of the important space on the top left side. And that has now been separated. It is separated into a clear navigation, which you basically know from all the other tools. And we have structured that in 3 areas. The first of these areas is the monitoring area. That's where you do your operation stuff, like looking at the hosts, looking at the services, setting downtimes, stuff like that. Then we have the customize area, where you work on your customizing of these dialogues, which you can change what column is displayed and so on. And we have the setup area, which is basically configuring Checkmk, adding new hosts, discovering services, all the things that you need to configure Checkmk. Behind these menus, we have a big menu, which is also structured in the topics you're interested in. We have search elements for navigating quickly through these areas. And also added, maybe it's also interesting here, the breadcrumb navigation, which is basically connecting every page we have in Checkmk in kind of a tree, which you can then use to navigate through the pages up and down, look at the details, go one level up, and stuff like that. The second biggest piece of this UI rework we did in the 2.0 is the replacement of the old graphing system, which was back then in the Raw edition, PNP for Nagios, with the RRD tool-based graphs, images that you could not easily zoom in, zoom out, and stuff like that. And we replaced that with the graphing we used in the enterprise editions a long time before. So you have now more performant graphs, faster rendering. You have interactive elements where you can zoom in and drag around, and also have basically a better user experience in working with time series information. You have these kind of previews, and that you can also quickly access different ranges in the time. An often criticized point in Checkmk was, from the beginning, that the data transport between the Checkmk agent, which is gathering information on your monitored system, and the Checkmk server was plain text by default. So it's very simple to set up, but it has its disadvantages in terms of security. Of course, you could set up a secure transport channel using asymmetric encryption, or even more secure with an SSH transport, but that was not enabled by default, so not good. We solved that starting from the 2.1 by introducing a TLS encryption. And again here, for us, it was very important to have a easy-to-use approach, not something where you need to do multiple steps to set it somehow up. And we wanted to have it as easy as possible. It is now basically installing the agent package, doing a registration, which establishes trust between the both parties, and from then on, the communication channel can be encrypted. The other big addition we started to build in Checkmk 2.0 is a new API, basically meant for automation, for automatic configuration of Checkmk itself, but also for operating tasks. The API can be used. It's an automatically documented REST API. So you have an API specification which you can use for your automation needs. And as you can see here now, it is also a wider coverage. It has been extended over the versions to cover more and more important aspects of the Checkmk configuration. So many are using this API for building their own connection between Checkmk and, for example, a CMDB or another information source, but also to get information out of Checkmk and dump the information somewhere else. As we know from the Nagios and also Isinger ecosystem, the extensibility of our tools is very important to all the users. Yeah, you have individual tools in your environment, you want to build the monitoring for them. Therefore, you need kind of APIs where you can build your custom plugins for. Checkmk plugins are a bit different than the common Nagios plugins you may know. They have a discovery capability, so they need to be built differently. We have an API for that, which is also documented within the software. So whatever Checkmk version you have, you can look up in your version the API documentation of your version and then build your stuff against that. Now, looking in the more recent changes, Checkmk 2.2 was released in May. We were focusing also, again, heavily on UI elements, and they're mostly focusing on making life easier with Checkmk, bringing more power to the features we already have. We have a table view here displaying a list of hosts or something, which can be filtered with various different filters. You can filter by host name, service description, whatever, and also by labels. Labels are in Checkmk basically like you know it from other systems, key value pairs, and these labels can be combined with different operators, is and or not. And so that you can filter the objects very flexible in the way you want to have your view display something, or a dashboard filter the elements to respect in the visualization you build. Talking about Grafana, in the last talk you heard that, and we also saw that everyone is using it. So it's obvious to have that we need to have a Checkmk integration with Grafana. We had that for quite some time. Earlier this year, we released the version 3 of that extension, which is mostly also improving what we already had. Working on performance, so we are also now using our own REST API. We are using more efficient API calls and less calls to make bigger dashboards render faster. We have worked, after interviewing a bunch of users about the workflows, the problems they have, worked a lot on the user experience in that integration to make it easier to approach the configuration of this integration with Grafana. And under the hood, we also did a lot to make it easier to work on this integration. So we invested in the quality of this component because we think it's very important to have something like that and also to have it working continuously. So we build up end-to-end tests for the core workflows for this integration. For the developers, we built up tools like unit tests. Type safety is now in the code. So there's less room for errors during development. And then after we made this 3 release, we shortly after released version 3.1 with a feature addition. And by that, you can also see that this component is actually developed with a lot of feedback of the user base. It's a GitHub project. We get information from there, from the pull requests we received there, or from the bug reports. And also we receive feedback on our forums and our Checkmk idea portal. Over the years, we received various requests that we should somehow be able to deal with variables in Grafana. If you build dashboards on your own, you probably know that. You can build generic dashboards and input some variables inside to not have to build multiple dashboards for multiple hosts, but have a single dashboard for, let's say, a Linux host. And that's what we built with the 3.1. Well, a video cannot be shown, so sad. Sorry, so I can show you that. But I can't even proceed with the next slide. Nice. Okay. Okay. So what is shown here is a dashboard. Yeah. You have 3 dashboards: CPU, memory, and disk usage, which is defined once. There's a variable defined in the dashboard, and at the top you define a variable of Linux host 1, and then it shows the metrics of this host, and if you select Linux host 2, you get the labels of this host. Yeah, that's what the video is showing. Besides that, I just picked a few features. Yeah? Besides that, we are doing a lot of different stuff, which would make the talk explode here. So I have just kind of a summary slide, what we've been doing in that version. As you may see, we are working heavily on extending our monitoring capabilities. Yeah? So adding a lot of stuff for the things that are needed in today's IT. We are doing a lot of stuff for performance to make Checkmk scale even better. And we're working also heavily on user experience to make it easier, more fun to work with Checkmk. So talking a bit about the Checkmk ecosystem. So Checkmk itself, it is available as open source software. There's an enterprise product and a company behind. And in such a situation, you may think, well, everything is powered by that company, and yeah, that's it. There are customers and they do their thing. Okay, but that's not the case. Yeah? We have a pretty active community which works together in different ways. One thing, we receive pull requests on our projects on GitHub from more than 180 contributors. So I think not a small number. Of course, most of these contributions are in the area of check development. So there's someone using a check from us, knows something better than we do, sends a pull request to improve that. Also, new plugins are provided that way sometimes. So very active there. In our forum, mostly a Checkmk user forum, there are over 6,000 users and more than 10,000 daily visits. So a good choice for discussions and also for gathering information about Checkmk. Then we have the Checkmk Exchange, which is basically the space where people upload the stuff they build for themselves. And where they think, well, that could be useful for someone else, and people download it from there. So there you can really find good pieces of software built from experts in their fields with the knowledge they have, with the thing they have in mind what should be monitored. So it's definitely a useful source for things to monitor more systems than we can do out of the box. Also, the community is working on translations together. And besides these, well, maybe smaller projects, we have also a few special ones I'd like to share with you. There's the Checkmk Ansible collection, which has been originally founded by 2 colleagues of mine. But by now we have nearly 30 contributors to that. And pretty important piece, also sits on top of the REST API for the automating task it can do. Initially, it was started for deploying agents automatically, registering them with Checkmk, but by now you can also set up Checkmk installations, which is really interesting if you have larger scale of installations, like several thousand Checkmk sites or something, then this can be really useful. Then there's the CMDB syncer. I think many of you may know there's a CMDB in many environments, a good information source which you may want to use for configuring Checkmk. And in most environments, people start with some scripts, put some glue between Checkmk and the CMDB, and then somehow exchange information. And the CMDB syncer is trying to standardize that somehow so that you don't have to write scripts that you only have to provide configuration, what should map to what, and stuff like that. Yeah, that's about this. And then we have a so-called label picker built by Philipp Lemke, also a long-year Checkmk user. He had the idea that he would like to have more labels in Checkmk because they are so useful to use in the configuration to make it more efficient, to make it more flexible in the way Checkmk can be configured. So he took more data sources into account. For example, here in this example, we have a vSphere system, extract the tags from of a VM and produce a Checkmk label out of that. And in this procedure, things can also be rewritten. For example, if you don't like that this is somehow mixed case, then you can lowercase everything or something, or extract something out of the string. So quite flexible tool, which extends the capabilities of Checkmk. So next topic, looking behind the scenes. So as I initially said, I joined Matthias back in 2010 as a first employee besides Matthias, quite some time ago. And in the time, things have changed a lot. So by now, we are 150 people in the company, full-time working for the company. Most of them are working in a hybrid setup nowadays, and mostly are surrounded in the area of Munich. There's also our main office, but we also have a sales office in Atlanta for providing support in the US, for the US, have a salespeople there and first level support there. And the pictures you can see here is from our yearly conference we have in Munich. This is, I think, from the last conference. We did that at Nockerberg, so a few of you may know that from the Politischer Aschermittwoch. So it's quite a nice event location, really enjoying that. Now looking a bit deeper into the organization, particularly specifically at the technical organization of Checkmk. So with a huge growth, like we just saw, to 150 people, you might imagine that, yeah, that's all salespeople. But no, not in Checkmk. We have a quite big growth in the tech organization. Over the years, as you can see, we started to build up the development team. And that was simply to keep up with the demand we had, and we were seeing a customer demand for feature requests, for extending Checkmk in the way that is needed there. Then we have started building up the consulting organization, basically to be able to deliver the support we had to deliver and do all the consulting sessions we need. And then a bit later, we started building up the knowledge management team, a dedicated team which job is to teach Checkmk basically. They care for the user manual, they care for translations, they do videos, other kinds of training concepts, blog articles around Checkmk to make it a breeze to learn it. Also, looking back, a quite good investment there to make that greater, because it helps every user. And then lastly, we have started building a dedicated product management function, so a team basically focusing on what needs to be done next. What is the next thing to build? Not only the big things, but also in the smaller pieces to understand what are the needs, and then telling the developers what to do specifically. In the years before we had that, the developers were doing that. So quite a challenging job for a developer, because you had to think of not only like a developer, but also kind of a product manager and have that lens of the user, stuff like that. That is now changed, or is changing continuously. So again, growing up basically as a software development team. So what's next? Our product focus is we basically base everything on the infrastructure monitoring we are capable of doing, which is our core basically. We are here for monitoring all the IT, let's call it hybrid IT, wherever you are with your environment, whether you run your Kubernetes environment locally, in the cloud, whether you do virtualization, whatever, Checkmk is able to deal with that. And yeah, on top of that, the next thing you think of is the layer above, looking at the applications. And when you think about application monitoring, there's all the stuff we already talked about today, logs, metrics, traces, observability stuff, whatever. But there's also synthetic monitoring, as we call it, and you may know it as end-to-end monitoring also. That gives you a completely different view on your system, and I would say a very central, important view, the view of your user. The problem we have today is that the systems are so huge and complex, you don't even need to have a microservice architecture. It can also be a connection of all the network devices, cloud providers, containers, Kubernetes, whatever abstraction layer. If you want to look at the metrics, the high-level metrics even, you can't really be sure if your user is happy about your service, if the experience on the user side in the browser is great or not. And that is where synthetic monitoring shines and can tell you, yeah, it's actually working like it should. So here should be a video. Let's see. Oh, wow, cool. So that's great. So that's done by the computer, right? What we have here is at Carl Zeiss AG, it's kind of an online shop, which you can configure to, use to configure lenses and check out them, buy them, and then you are happy that you get your new lenses. What is happening here is a full checkout process, basically the core process, what a user is doing. And all this ends up in Checkmk, maybe like this. Here at the top, you have a NACVIS map showing you the states of the individual stages in our test. First of all, I need to log into the shop, then open an order, select my lenses and stuff like that, and then finally I have my logout. So that's kind of a high-level view of the state of the individual steps, and that's a bit more broken down, and also with a few detailed information here. And if you would hover this, you would even see some metrics about the performance of your process. How long did this step take? Stuff like this. All this is done by RobotMK, also an extension to Checkmk, which is built by Simon Meckle. Thanks for that, Simon. It is basically a connector between Checkmk and the robot framework. And the robot framework is a general purpose automation framework. So whatever kind of application you want to monitor, you can use robot framework to somehow use the specialized frameworks, for example, for monitoring web applications, but also console applications. Yeah.
When it mimics a user, the robot, can it cope with two-factor authentications?
So the question was, can it cope with two-factor authentication? Yes. Depends on where you run your simulated user interaction. Yeah? If you have a, I don't know, virtual machine, for example, and there the test is executed, you somehow need the second factor available. And depends on what is needed to be done. If you have a YubiKey and need to click on that, well, that needs some kind of solution, but there are solutions for that. So it depends on what you need. Yeah? With TOTP is something then again different, but in principle it can be done, and how specifically depends on your problem. Yeah. But as I said, it's kind of a general tool, and which gives you a framework for building stuff, basically. Okay, moving on. Yeah, so that's about the synthetic monitoring. And I think that's something that, I don't know how many developers are there or people providing services for developers, but many developers are actually doing some kind of end-to-end test within the CI system. Yeah? And there they may execute some tests after merging something, stuff like that. But the synthetic monitoring is something different. In regards to that, you continuously look at your system and see how it performs in reality. And it's only a trigger. Yeah? You don't have the breakdown to whatever logs, metrics, what you would look at next when you see something like that. It is mostly giving you the high-level view, but a really useful view. So overall, the plan for Checkmk 2.3, the major topics for us are these. Synthetic monitoring, I already talked about. The SaaS product, sorry for this short commercial thing. Checkmk will be available as a service next year, mid of next year. The team is heavily building that up, and I wanted to mention that at least shortly, because it's a very huge step for us as a company to offer something like that. Not for you probably, but for other interest groups that can really be something that is interesting. And besides that, as I presented for the past, we are still focusing on improvements in our core features. Again, focusing on these things, making life easier, better with Checkmk. Now we're working not on the fundamental bigger concepts, but smaller part of the UI, parts which are often used, for example, the host, create dialog, or operation dialogues when you set downtimes or something to make that easier to understand. Another thing which is really important, as I mentioned earlier, are the developer APIs. Also to make the Checkmk ecosystem more scalable. So if you have a complex environment, you probably have a few extensions from the Checkmk exchange, and some of them are interfacing with APIs that with the Checkmk code, not through well-defined APIs. So when we do changes to Checkmk, when you upgrade to the next major version, there's pretty likely that something breaks. Because we don't know what you use and you don't know what we changed. So to prevent that, we are building more and more APIs for the common areas where people plug into Checkmk, UI extensions, check plugins, metric extensions. There's quite a few stuff coming with the next version. And in terms of monitoring, as you saw for the past versions, we simply continue doing that and monitor the system which are relevant out there. And I think, slide-wise, that's it. So, any questions?
Give me a second. Let me use that one. Are there any questions? Isn't it working? Yes, now. Are there any questions?
Once again, for the
One. Then we don't have to repeat it. There you go.
throw it. Once again, for the synthetic monitoring, is it already available and productive?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so RobotMK itself is already available for quite some time. You can also use it with the existing Checkmk version. The state so far is that you have to integrate that on your own. It's not that hard. It is documented how to do that. And I think most challenging part of the job is to get it running in the environment where you want to run the test. In your Windows virtual machine, for example, where you have the logged-in session and then the browser is opened and stuff like that. There you need to set up a Python environment and the dependencies you need for the test framework you run in the end. That can be, depending on your needs, a bit challenging, also depending on how many executors you need to have, whether it's only one machine or 10, whatever number of machines. And this is where we want to improve the ecosystem. And we want to integrate that completely in Checkmk. So when you install Checkmk, it is in the software. And with the delivery mechanisms of the agent, you can also push out all these robots and the configured tests to the agents so that you don't have to mess around with that on your own.
Mm. All right, understood, thank you. Is Checkmk necessary for this synthetic monitoring?
So the robot framework does not know anything about Checkmk. So you could run that on your own and write your test there. And well, then you would have to somehow integrate it with some kind of system, maybe Jenkins or whatever CI system you have, or you integrate it with your monitoring system would work. Yeah.
All right, I will contact you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Otherwise, I'll have a follow-up question. But I want to give the audience first choice. No? So in my head, like end-to-end monitoring should be like if I want to have a realistic scenario, should like the agents that do that should be outside of my organization best, like really, I mean network segmentation wise outside. Do you have any thoughts on that? I don't have a clear question. Is that something you think of when you design that? I think is my question.
Yeah, so it depends on what you want to achieve with your tests. Yeah? If you, for example, have your web shop and you say, my important markets are Europe and US, then it's probably important to have tests executed from these regions. Maybe an AWS instance, or maybe you have data centers or whatever, and then run the test from there to also get the performance from the perspective of the users. Yeah? That can definitely be done, and that's also why we want to make the deployment so easy that it's not a pain to have many of these executors.
Right. Yep. Thanks. Anybody else?
All right, I will be afterwards around here, so feel free to ask later.
All right. Thank you very much. Big applause.
Thank you.